Hi, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, and I hope you've been having a successful conference so far. Unfortunately, we are the guys that stand between you and drinks, right? But as you know, we like to save the best for last. As you can see, we have assembled a pretty diverse panel. You've got investment bankers, you've got investor developers, and you've got hyperscaler. So I'm looking forward to an engaging discussion with all of you guys, right? So before we begin, maybe we'll do a bit of introduction. So my name is Kok-Chye Ong. I'm currently an advisor with Gaw Capital. And then over to you guys. Yeah.
Thanks, Manjit Balgir. I work at Bank of America, Merrill Lynch here in Singapore. Been advising clients and investors over the last 20 years and very heavily focused on digital infrastructure, data centers being a big part of that these days. Good to meet everybody.
Hi, my name is Dev. I do dates. I don't do data centers. So I don't know why I'm here. But on a serious note, I look after our data center portfolio in CapitaLand. We have about 28 operating data centers, 12 of which are in Europe, 16 in Asia, about 800 megawatts of gross power.
Hi, Kavi Kumar here. I'm from Microsoft. My role is essentially to look at ESG and policy planning for our Asia-Pacific business, focused on our data center assets in Asia-Pacific. So very pleased to be here as well. Thank you.
Thank you. So let's set the scene. Everyone is aware that Asia has seen astronomical growth in terms of capacity added and new regions being included. In the last couple of years, right? So I'd like to ask the first question to both Kav and to Dev, right? How do you see this trend continuing, right? Is it going up? Is it going to stable? And how do you see things going? Right?
Yeah, I think we can all agree that APAC has been the next growth frontier for data centers, right? I think we all see the current capacity that's being constructed and that is supposed to come online pretty soon. So I think clearly the trend is showing that the demand is relatively strong, right? And I think for good reason, right? I think in Asia Pacific we are seeing a lot of what we call the digital transformation of enterprises happening at scale. And that is contributing to that. And also, I think beyond that, I think it's also about population growth and also the greater digital penetration that we're seeing in this part of the world that's contributing to that growth. So I think in good light, I think this is supposed to, hopefully it goes in that trajectory. And even for a company like ours, I think a lot of the data center builds that we are putting out is all driven by demand signals, right? So we don't build if there are no demand signals. So clearly there are demand from customers, enterprise cloud customers, that are requesting for our data, our cloud service solutions, which is great to see, right? And I think that bodes well for Asia from a growth perspective. Data centers are a really critical digital infrastructure in today's economy, right? In today's data-driven economy, and I think we are seeing that play out, right? So I think what will happen in the next couple of years is the growth of data centers, but not just the growth of just any data center, but the growth of green sustainable data centers, right? So I think that is where the shift is moving towards. And at the same time, I think there's also a strong interest in creating more higher value-add jobs for the industry, right? I think this is something that we don't really talk about, but I think that is where the sort of digital talent will have to come online, right? And I think clearly the numbers are pointing to the fact that we have a shortage of digital talent, right? So this will enable us to transition our economies as well, creating more higher value-add jobs. So all in all, I think I see this in positive light, and I think the future looks bright and hopeful. I think the challenge is what we are seeing right now is the decentralization, right? So we see concentrations of demand and then concentrations of supply, which is where data centers can be based from a energy optimization use perspective, right? So how are we going to solve that challenge? I think that's where we probably need to explore a more decentralized approach, right? And I think there are some pain points in Asia Pacific, for example, infrastructure readiness. There are some infrastructure gaps to really support the level of latency that's required in this part of the world, and more importantly, the capacity demands that we're going to see in this part of the world. But I think data centers, suffice to say, I think top of mind in a lot of government discussions, and I think that really puts it in great light, in my opinion.
All right. Thank you. Dev, how about you?
So I think the current operational capacity is about, 16, 17 gigawatts across Asia Pac, including China. I think it's about another 4 gigawatts in late-stage construction and another 16, 17 gigawatts in various stages of planning and development. And that's pretty much, again, to his point, it's all spoken for. It's capacity that's being created where we know there is demand, whether it's pure inferencing demand, or it's cloud demand, or it's even AI learning demand. So what is the next wave, right? And we all say there's a demand and supply gap. I guess we have to figure out locations that are going to serve a specific type of workload or workloads, and that's what would drive the next phase of growth. But just to put it in context, I got some figures. Not trying to bore you with numbers at the end of the day, but if you look at megawatts per million population, or you look at exabytes of data per million population data sphere, or you look at petabytes of data traffic per day per million population, and we track those very, very ardently, and you think of India, China, even Indonesia, Thailand, they're about 1/60th or 1/70th of what US is. And that's a long, long way to go. They're even 1/20th or 1/30th of where Japan is. So we're talking about 3 billion population, the largest data consumer per day, and very little capacity. And my favorite point here is data creation leads to data consumption, leads to data creation. It's a vicious cycle, and we think we're going to see that in the long term.
Right. Thanks, Dev. So to your point, right, Asia has more people in the world than the rest of the world put together, right? So Dev, in your view, what are the impediments to stopping Asia or delaying Asia from growing to what it's supposed to be?
I mean, clearly, the obvious cliche response is power. Last 7-8 years, CAGR of data center growth has been about 20-21%, and power throughput, not generation, but availability of power on site, has grown about 4.4%. So massive mismatch between requirement and what is available. So that's clearly something that we need to think about, worry about, not generation, but distribution, transmission. I feel that's going to continue to be a big impediment. The other impediment from my perspective, and it's called tech capital for a reason, is actually money. Not the availability of capital, but the availability of risk capital at the right time for the right product. Are we able to buy land and get power for 150, 200 megawatt facility purely speculatively, in spite of everything, right? So we know there's demand. We know that eventually there's going to be take-up, but is that capital available? I think that would be a clear impediment. And if I may, the third seemingly new impediment is actually exit of these assets. 100 megawatt data center at $100 is about $2 billion of GAV. Who's going to buy them?
Yeah, thanks. Manjit, would you care to comment about those points, and maybe you have any other?
Yeah, just to give a perspective also in terms of, I guess, how an investor or people who have global viewpoints around this see is this point around capital, $1 deployed in APAC versus $1 deployed in the US, and we're faced with this moment in time where it's happening everywhere all at once, and it's insatiable. So where do I put that dollar? I can put it in the US at a far less kind of risky proposition in a sense than where we may have it in say, one of the emerging markets where we are here in the world. So in that sense, the opportunity is clearly there. I think one of the other factors that's relevant is where Asia Pacific, or at least emerging Asia, is on the digitalization journey. And that is the opportunity, but that's also a little bit of the handbrake as well in terms of the, how expansive the growth can actually be. We're coming from a pretty low base, but, markets in Asia are much more heterogeneous, and they're not homogeneous in the way that Europe and the US and, to an extent you can put Australia in that sphere as well. What works over there can arguably work quite easily in those markets. In Asia, you have to be very local in your approach, and I think we can touch on some of those other thematics that make some of the markets more challenging than others, but that would be some of the perspectives I can add.
Thank you. So moving on, all of us in this industry typically segment the industry into things like enterprise colo, cloud, interconnect, right? But much of the growth in recent years has been driven by AI, right? So we'd just like to ask, do you see AI becoming a distinct segment on its own? And with AI being integrated into the cloud, do you see really the end of enterprise co-location, right? So, Dev, what do you think about this?
I think AI will disrupt, not destroy co-location. I think AI is meant to be a tool on top of co-location, which, or even on top of cloud, which helps end users being enterprises or individuals to do things more productively and more efficiently. So I'm not seeing there's been a clear distinction, obviously, traditional enterprise and cloud has been stable, traditional enterprise has been sort of going down. Now, the thing about AI is it actually helps with cloud migration, and we don't talk enough about that. Remediation process and migration to the cloud because of AI is actually picking up, and we think that enterprises who didn't want to move to cloud because of cost or time will do that, and you will have more applications which integrate cloud and AI. So I don't think that it's a destroyer.
Manjit, you look at deals all across the world, so what's your perspective on this?
Yeah, I guess there's obviously a rush of investment into the AI and the cloud side of things and data centers that cater to that demand. There's also a different lens that some people still look at it and deliberately focus on connectivity-focused data center platforms serving a certain client and customer base. And then you look at also markets in different ways as well. So people can clearly see the opportunity in Japan around, hyperscale and AI. But if I use Japan as an example of a market which is a little bit different to others, historically the SIs have really garnered a lot of the kind of share of IT spend and wallet from all of the, local customers that have basically outsourced their IT to the SIs. And so the customer in a big way in Japan is actually the SIs, and there you could still say, quote unquote, traditional co-location, and they're running workloads for their corporate clients. Japan, as a kind of policy perspective, is also being quite careful in how it does take up public cloud and wants to keep a lot of this kind of domestic and then domestically derived cloud products, as well as also keeping a lot of things in a kind of hybrid or even private cloud environment. So demand drivers in Japan, although there's one sphere of it, there is another sphere of it which is quite bespoke in a way to Japan, and it certainly lags other developed economies in terms of public cloud adoption. So I think investment strategies can cater to those different nuances within what a data center can provide.
Thank you. I'd like to touch a bit about the technology part of things, right? As we are all aware, there's been a rapid evolution of the NVIDIA GPUs and associated technology in the last couple of years. We've all seen the increase on rack density, case in point, from Hoppers to Rubins, from 50 kilowatt racks to 300 kilowatt racks in the next couple of years, in the next 48 months. So my question to all three of you, are data centers at higher risk of obsolescence? Are they still the long-lived asset that we love to invest in? Maybe I'll start with Ka. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the tech cycle will continue to evolve, right? I mean, traditionally, when we just started data centers, we look at, single double-digit 10 kilowatts sort of racks. But today, I mean, we are pushing the boundaries. We're looking at even like 1 megawatt. Can we compress 1 megawatt within that rack? unimaginable computing density, and that's where we are, right? And I think we are continuing to sort of also push the boundaries on that. And I think in the interest of all tech companies, it's in our DNA to push those boundaries, right? To get better computing density for the amount of energy that we're using. Traditional data centers, I think, will have a part to play in the ecosystem, right? I mean, the same conversation took place many years ago when the traditional data centers were around. Like, how can we enable efficiency? How can we enable optimization? But look, fast forward 15, 20 years down the road, we're having the same conversation with AI again, right? So it's a bit paradoxical and also sort of interesting to look back, right, on that evolutionary cycle that we've come through, right? So I think it's also in the interest of chip makers to, get a greater bang for buck in the chip, so greater compression, closer bits, and we're really pushing the limits, right? And this is where the collaboration needs to happen between not just the hyperscalers and the chip makers, but also the co-location service providers and also traditional enterprise data centers, right? I think that needs to happen further to really enable to understand the pain points in that. So to your point, I think there will be still traditional data centers for certain customer segments. I think eventually the voice of the customer will speak, so I think there will be that. And I think even in Asia Pacific, much of the demand is still coming from traditional enterprise cloud segment, right? We are seeing some demand for inferencing, but not so much, right? So I think there's still greater potential for that to happen in Asia Pacific, which I think will happen in the next couple of years, right? And also, I think it's not just about chip technology, but it's also about the cooling technology, right? This has to go hand in hand because it's not just computing. The problem here we're trying to solve essentially is heat, right? So I think that's where that technological evolution will have to happen between chip makers and also the cooling solution providers to really optimize that cycle, right? And I think moving forward, we have other things that are happening in the pipeline, such as quantum computing, which is probably the next wave that's going to happen. But I think that's where the challenge is across all hyperscalers, right? And to really build density at scale and deploying them in a manner that is very energy or power optimized.
Thank you. Dev. Oh.
Yeah, so this is a question that gets asked at every investment committee, if not the first question, probably the second. So yeah, gotten used to answering this over the last 10, 15 years. So the way we think of obsolescence is structural obsolescence, functional obsolescence. Structural obsolescence is more the infrastructure, the building, and the cooling technology. Building, you can build whatever, 2.5 kilonewton per meter square, 7.5 meters floor to floor, and you're good for about 15, 20 years. I think what the second level would be the cooling. Now, cooling, I feel, will go through its own process. I think we have to understand that the tech refresh life cycles have shortened and will continue to shorten. So we have to be flexible, we have to be modular as far as cooling and power technologies are concerned. They need to be skidded, take in, plug out, and that's something that we have to live with. I don't think we have a choice as developer operators on that front. On the functional obsolescence, yes, a lot gets talked about, Blackwell going to Rubin and Hoppers being useless. But if you see even today, most R&D still gets done on H100s and H200s. There's very little GB200s, and people seem to be fairly happy with that. AWS continues to use chips for about 10 years, and now distillation processes have become so much better that you can use older chips for longer periods of time. So I'm not so sure that obsolescence is such a big challenge. And the last point is, just the number of compute instances because of new use cases, whether it's video analytics, 5G, IoT, has gone up like 20, 30 folds in the last 5 years. So, everything has a use. Every type of chip has a use.
Thanks, Dev. Manjit, what's your view on this topic?
No, I agree with the panelists here. I guess as some people think of just hearing what clients say, particularly those that are looking at investments in the space, if you look at a sort of a GPU as a service type of a business, this question often comes up in terms of, okay, in 5 years, do I need to have made all my money back because these chips will be worthless and there'll be no further customers to be, doing workloads on them. And nobody really has a crystal ball, but I think to what Deb just said there, that yes, there'll be always a subset of customers on the bleeding edge who will always need and want that latest and greatest to be doing the innovation at that point in time in 5 years. But there still should be a use case, is the working assumption, in 5 years for whatever chipset is being developed and used today as a GPU of a service. Now, I would still caution that you do want to make a lot of your return back probably in those years to feel comfortable about it. But, there's the tension there between what you will be able to price that to a customer to use today versus, on a kind of ever diminishing base as new generations of chips come out. So therein lies the art of the investing, and whether that plays out, well for everybody, we're yet to see it because we haven't really seen the back end of such business models yet.
Thanks. I'd like to go back to a comment that was raised earlier, where capital was raised as a constraint. I think, Dev, you mentioned that. But yet, at the same time, we see headlines every day where people are pouring billions and billions of dollars into new campuses. So there appears to be a bit of an irony in this. So Manjit, would you like to comment about this? Is capital constrained? Do we need new structures? Do we need new types of capital?
Yeah, it's certainly a volume of capital, and we've seen innovation in the way that capital comes together, whether it be at different layers of a corporate capital stack, and ordinary equity, preference equity, mezzanine debt, all the way up to senior debt, and project financing style facilities that have been there now more and more common, and is the way that both individual projects as well as platforms these days are being funded. What we are also seeing, and I saw a meme about it obviously quite recently, is this sort of not so much a virtuous cycle, but a little bit of a money machine where you have NVIDIA into OpenAI, into Oracle, into NVIDIA. So there's this circle of $100 billion moving around. Are these businesses funding each other through purchases and what would traditionally be considered some form of vendor financing in a way? That's right on, again, on the front end of the new innovative side of the kind of company set. I guess in the more traditional data center development on the cloud and that bare bones infrastructure that needs to be built, there is a dearth of capital still available from banks as well as equity investors. They have become more discerning over the platforms that they invest in, and I think the projects that they invest in, and it does start narrowing to a kind of flight to quality in terms of the platforms that they invest in and those that they feel like have that right to win. A large part of that is winning business from a very core set of customers, which, Dev is a very important part of that whole ecosystem.
Dev, do you share the views?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I guess, and to my earlier point on having the right capital at the right time is important. I think it's a question of risk capital. I feel the people who have control of the purse strings, large infrastructure funds, private equity funds, they probably don't understand the life cycle of development of a data center as closely. From the time you think of a land to the time you actually buy the land, 12 months. Power on any given good day is 12 to 18 months. So construction doesn't start before 2 years from the day you found the land. And then another 2 years of construction and another 2 or 3 years of stabilization. So if you were to go through that life cycle, there is a rainbow at the end of that tunnel. The question is, are you willing to invest upfront on buying that land and getting that power, not knowing when the customer will come? So if we could, as an industry, start to educate the larger sources of capital a little bit more, and they have become educated, is way, way better than it used to be 4 or 5 years ago. So I think that's one. And second is, just the the whole structuring in Asia specifically, there isn't yet enough depth in the credit markets to have mezzanine structures to dissociate the opco with the propco with the asset co, which is the MEP co, which will help all three sub-asset classes to thrive. We don't think like that yet. Other more evolved geographies probably do.
Thanks, Dev. So my next question is really about the future, right? Like as in the game of football and also in the game of business, we must always be going to where the ball is headed towards and not where the ball is currently right now. We are now in the age of generative AI, right? And we are all users of ChatGPT. In 2 years, I mean, Sam Altman was predicting that we'll have agentic AI when it's a whole new ball game altogether, right? So my question to you, Kaf, how do you think with the introduction of AGI in probably 2 or 3 years' time, in your mind, if you can have a crystal ball, would you be able to give some high-level guidance on how do you think that will affect data center infrastructure, the way it's designed, the way it's operated, and so on?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think it all boils down to the single fact of Jevons paradox, I feel. I mean, with increased consumption, we are also looking at better efficiency. And I think, to your point, agentic AI, it's already there, right? I mean, we are already toying with that. In fact, at Microsoft, we are already building out some of these agentic AIs within our, use cases and our specific operations. So that it's there, right? And I think the future will really be a lot on a couple of things. I think modular construction, I think that's going to be very important. I think that's where the next play is going to be, right? Who can be highly modularized? I think that's going to be critical. The second one, I think, is around green innovation and green technology, right? And that also includes green molecules, right? So I think that's where the play is going to be, right? Like, are we looking at out-of-the-box things like, timber for construction, right? That sort of materials that have a low embodied carbon footprint. And then, of course, how can we transmit green electrons as much as possible from the grid or a microgrid to the DC, right? So I think that's that. And then, of course, the third element is, of course, efficiency and latency, right? I think that optimization will happen at scale, creating that agility, right? I think traditionally the data centers were built with, how can we optimize square feet area and a bit of redundancy? But I think the new age data centers are all about agility and also really customizing needs and right size and really being built in a right size manner for their consumers or customers. So that's where I see that play moving, in my opinion, yeah.
Right, Dev. So is this the moment where edge AI or edge data centers will really take off?
Yeah, 100%. I'm such a big believer of that. I think edge, agentic or AGI on the edge is something that I really strongly feel and advocate about, having the 10, 20 megawatt data centers associated with a telecom tower, which essentially becomes your AI, and especially when you have native learning models, sovereign learning models in local languages, or small learning models, which can solve the problem of that community and be very close to the customer, individual or enterprise through a telecom infrastructure. Clearly, that's going to be the way to go. I'm also equally excited about Microsoft's latest announcement of a chip which changes the paradigm of how cooling happens with microfluidics. It's, there's veins inside the chip that cool the chip now. I think that is a technology very, very promising and should really change how cooling is considered. And then if I crystal ball further, I think there's a company or a technology called Cortical in Australia that have now started to grow neurons, actual brain neurons on silicon, which truly is, it seems like absolutely the next level of how we think of AGI or even artificial superintelligence, fusing the two.
All very exciting stuff. So I'd like to open the time to the floor if you guys have any Q&A. Right? I don't see any questions. Perhaps everyone is a bit thirsty right now. Okay, I'd like to close the panel, perhaps maybe by inviting the panelists, just like 30 seconds. What are the key takeaways? If there's one key takeaway from this panel, what would you want the audience to go away with? So Manjit, what about you?
Yeah, I think that the continuing innovation of business models is very interesting, and whether it be hardware-driven, as just touched on with the microfluidics, or evolving business models, I think we just have to keep on our toes because it's constantly changing from under our feet. And for the most part, we want to get it right. There'll be a few missteps for sure, but I think forums like this collectively help us, hopefully be closer to that, winning end of the spectrum than the losing.
Yeah, I have a 20-year-old and tried talking her out of using her phone for less than 6 hours a day. So, the future is bright.
Kaf?
Yeah, this just exemplifies the fact that we need closer intersection and collaboration amongst all the critical actors in this ecosystem that have a role, that have a vested interest in data centers, be it the FIs, the developers, the operators, and then, of course, eventually even the users of these solutions. So I think that is very important, I feel. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I hope you guys had a successful conference today. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Kok-Chye Ong, and all the panelists. Please stay on stage.